The cold hit me like a physical blow when I stepped off the helicopter. Even through my thermal gear, the wind cut straight to my bones. I'd prepared for this, mentally, at least. 6 months at the Dai 2 radar station in the middle of Greenland's ice sheet. Just me and 5 other people watching radar screens and weather patterns in one of the most isolated places on Earth. The helicopter pilot gave me a thumbs up before lifting off, leaving me standing alone beside my duffel bag as the rotor wash kicked up a blizzard of loose snow. I watched until the chopper was just a dark speck against the endless white horizon. Then it was gone, and the silence rushed in. A figure emerged from the blocky structure ahead, a raised compound on stilts that looked like a cross between a research station and a small oil rig, standing about 20 feet above the snow on massive steel legs. The approaching figure waved me forward. "Calhoun," he called over the wind. "Jaden Lee, station supervisor. Let's get you inside before you freeze solid." I grabbed my bag and trudged after him through knee-deep snow. Up close, Lee was stocky and solid-looking, with closely cropped salt and pepper hair and a square jaw with stubble. His blue eyes sized me up quickly. "First time in the Arctic?" he asked as we reached the metal stairs leading up to the main entrance. "Yeah." My voice came out muffled through my face covering. "You'll get used to it, or you won't." He shrugged. "Either way, it's 6 months." The stairs creaked under our weight as we climbed. At the top, Lee punched a code into a keypad and the heavy metal door swung open. Warm air rushed out, and I stepped into a small mud room where we stomped the snow from our boots and hung our outer layers on hooks. "Main living quarters are through here," Lee said, leading me through another door. The interior was utilitarian but comfortable. A common area with mismatched furniture, a small kitchen space visible through a doorway, and corridors branching off in different directions. 4 people sat around a table playing cards, all looking up when we entered. "Everyone, this is Ronnie Calhoun, our new radio operator," Lee announced. "Calhoun, meet the team." A slim woman with black hair tied back and wire-rimmed glasses barely looked up. "Janet Sandoval, communications specialist," she said quietly. Next to her, a muscular man with short black hair and tan skin nodded. "Alfred Dixon, I handle maintenance." His eyes darted to the door behind us, then back to me. "Make sure you lock that door. Double-check it." "Caroline McDonald, weather observer," said a woman with auburn hair cut in a bob and rectangular glasses. She had a small notebook open beside her cards. "I've logged your arrival time as 1600 hours and 22 minutes local." The last person, a wiry guy with disheveled sandy blonde hair, stood up and extended his hand. "Shane Fernandez. I keep the generators running. We're roommates, by the way." He glanced nervously at the window, though it was covered with heavy blinds. I shook hands with each of them, trying to commit names and faces to memory. They all had the same look, the 1,000-yard stare of people who'd been isolated too long. "Get settled in," Lee said. "Shane will show you to your quarters. Dinner's at 1800. We'll go over your duties tomorrow morning." Shane led me down one of the corridors, pointing out landmarks along the way. Bathroom, storage closets, emergency equipment. We passed several windows, all with blinds drawn tight despite the daylight outside. "Here we are," he said, stopping at a door. "Home sweet home for the next 6 months." The room was small but functional. 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 lockers. Shane's side was cluttered with technical manuals and spare parts. "Top bunk's yours," Shane said, helping me hoist my duffel onto it. "We run on a pretty tight schedule here. You'll get used to it." I unpacked my few personal items, some books, photos of my family, my journal. Shane watched me place a picture of my brother Caden and me on my desk. "That's your brother?" he asked. "Yeah, Caden. He thinks I'm crazy for taking this assignment." "Maybe you are," Shane said with a nervous laugh. "Listen, I should tell you." He stopped as a bell rang somewhere in the station. "That's the dinner call. Come on." Dinner was simple but filling, some kind of stew with bread. We ate mostly in silence, the only sounds being spoons against bowls and the constant low hum of the station's equipment. Afterward, Lee asked me to come to his office. His space was neat and organized with maps of Greenland on the walls and a desk covered with logbooks and weather reports. He gestured for me to sit. "Before you start your duties tomorrow, there are some things you need to know," Lee said, pulling a laminated card from his desk drawer. He slid it across to me. "The rules. Memorize them." I picked up the card. 6 rules were printed in bold black letters. 1. Always work in pairs. 2. Avoid windows at night. 3. Never answer knocks. 4. Track everyone's whereabouts. 5. Don't use the radio for music. 6. Trust your instincts. I looked up at Lee, waiting for the punchline, but his face remained serious. These aren't suggestions, Calhoun. They're requirements for survival out here. Survival? I asked. From what? The cold? Lee leaned forward. The cold is the least of your concerns. This station, it does things to people. We've lost crew members before. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. Lost them how? Follow the rules and you won't have to find out. Lee sat back. The isolation plays tricks on your mind. 6 people in close quarters for months on end, surrounded by nothing but ice and darkness once winter sets in. It gets to you. I slipped the card into my pocket. I'll follow the rules. Good. You start tomorrow with Janet. She'll show you the communications equipment. Lee stood, signaling the end of our conversation. Get some rest, Calhoun. You'll need it. Back in our room, Shane was already in bed, staring at the ceiling. I climbed up to my bunk and lay down, my mind racing with questions about the rules and Lee's warning. Shane, I whispered, you awake? Yeah. What did Lee mean about losing crew members? Shane was quiet for a long moment. Last winter we had a guy, Matthews. He went outside alone during a storm. We found him 2 days later, frozen solid about 100 yards from the station. He'd been walking in circles. Shane's voice dropped even lower. Before that, there was a woman who, well, let's just say she didn't follow rule number 3. I wanted to ask more, but Shane rolled over, clearly done with the conversation. I lay awake for hours, listening to the wind howl outside and the occasional creaks and groans of the station adjusting to the cold. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke suddenly in the darkness, disoriented. Something had pulled me from sleep, a sound. I lay perfectly still, listening. There it was again, a soft, rhythmic knocking on the wall next to my bunk. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up, straining my eyes in the darkness. Shane's breathing remained steady below me. He was still asleep. Knock, knock, knock. It came again, more insistent this time. Then, impossibly, I heard a voice, muffled but distinct. Ronnie, it's me. Let me in. My blood froze. It was Caden's voice, my brother's voice, coming from outside the wall. Ronnie, please. I'm freezing out here. I swung my legs over the side of the bunk, ready to climb down when a hand grabbed my ankle. Don't! Shane hissed, suddenly wide awake. Rule 3. Never answer knocks. But it sounds like it's not. Shane cut me off. Whatever you think you're hearing, it's not real. Rule 3, man. Rule 3. The knocking continued, along with my brother's voice pleading for help. I sat rigid on my bunk, Shane's hand still gripping my ankle, until eventually the knocking stopped and the voice faded away. What the hell was that? I whispered when I was sure it was gone. Shane let go of my ankle and lay back down. That's why we have the rules. Try to get some sleep. We'll check outside in the morning. I didn't sleep another minute that night. I sat with my back against the wall, the laminated card of rules clutched in my hand, waiting for dawn. The next morning, Shane and I bundled up and went outside to check the area around our room. The snow lay pristine and undisturbed, with no footprints anywhere near the station walls. See? Shane said, gesturing at the untouched expanse. Nothing. No one was out here last night. Then how do you explain what we heard? I asked, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Shane just shook his head. You don't explain it. You just follow the rules. After breakfast, Janet showed me to the communications room, a small space filled with radio equipment and monitoring devices. Her movements were precise and economical as she demonstrated how everything worked. Your main job is monitoring emergency channels and checking in with the mainland twice daily, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Morning check-in at 0800, evening at 2000. Log everything, even if it seems insignificant. I nodded, taking notes as she walked me through the procedures. The equipment was older than what I'd trained on, but the principles were the same. What about that? I asked, pointing to a separate radio setup in the corner. Janet's expression tightened. That's for picking up research team transmissions, but there aren't any teams out this season. She hesitated. Sometimes we pick up signals we can't explain. What kind of signals? Voices, music, Things that shouldn't be broadcasting out here. Janet adjusted her glasses. If you hear anything like that, log it and move on. Don't respond, don't investigate. Just log it and forget about it. Rule 5, I said, remembering the card. Don't use the radio for music. Janet nodded. The rule isn't about playing music. It's about listening to it when it comes through. She leaned closer. This place is a dead zone. There shouldn't be any signals except the ones we're expecting. So if you hear something else. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. I got the message. I understand, I said. Janet looked at me for a long moment as if trying to decide if I really did understand. Finally, she nodded. Good. Let's run through the morning check-in procedure again. As we worked, I couldn't stop thinking about the knocking in the night, about my brother's voice calling to me from outside a wall that faced nothing but endless snow, about the rules that seemed designed not just for safety but for sanity. 6 months suddenly felt like a very long time. I pulled my headphones off and rubbed my eyes. 3 in the morning, and I was halfway through my shift in the communications room. The radio crackled with static, then cleared. This is Research Team Bravo requesting immediate assistance. Our coordinates are 76.4 north, 41.8 west. Repeat, requesting immediate assistance. I sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. The voice sounded strained, desperate. I grabbed my logbook and jotted down the coordinates, then reached for the transmitter. This is Die 2 receiving. What's your situation? Over. Static filled the channel for several seconds before the voice returned, weaker now. We've lost 2 team members. Temperature dropping. Need extraction. The transmission cut out. I tried hailing them again but got nothing but white noise. I checked the map on the wall. Those coordinates put them about 60 miles northwest of us. I was about to try another frequency when the door opened behind me. Janet walked in, her black hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping either. Everything okay? I heard voices. Got a distress call from a research team, I said, showing her my log. Coordinates are here. They sound in bad shape. Janet looked at the log, then at me with a strange expression. She pulled up a chair and sat down. Ronnie, there are no research teams in the field right now. But I just heard them. They gave coordinates and everything. She shook her head. Winter season. All teams were pulled out months ago. Nobody gets clearance for field research this time of year. I played back the recording. The same desperate voice called out for help. Janet listened, then pointed to the laminated card stuck to the edge of my desk. Rule 5, Ronnie. We don't use the radio for music, or respond to signals that shouldn't exist. But they sound like they need help. Log it and ignore it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. These signals, they happen. We don't know why or how, but we don't engage. What if it's real? It's not. She stood up. Trust me on this. Just log it and forget it happened. I wrote down the details in the official log, marking it as an anomalous transmission per protocol. Janet watched over my shoulder until I finished. Get some coffee, she said. 4 more hours till shift change. After she left, I sat there staring at the radio. Part of me wanted to try calling again, but something in Janet's eyes had stopped me cold. The knocking started around midnight the next night. 3 sharp raps against the wall next to my bunk. Fernandez was snoring softly in the bottom bunk. I lay perfectly still, waiting. 3 more knocks, slightly louder. Ronnie? Jaden's voice came through the wall. Ronnie, I need your help out here. I glanced down at Fernandez's bunk, still asleep. The voice outside sounded exactly like Jaden's. Same commanding tone, same slight Boston accent. Ronnie, please, something's wrong with the generator. I need another set of hands. I remembered Rule 3, never answer knocks. I pulled my blanket tighter around me and stayed silent. I know you're awake, the voice said. I can see your light on. The light wasn't on. The room was pitch black except for the dim glow of Fernandez's digital watch on the nightstand. The knocking moved to the window. I couldn't see anything through the tightly drawn blinds. Son? A new voice now, my father's voice. Marcus, open up. My chest tightened. My father had died when I was 19. He'd never called me Marcus. That was my middle name, one I never used. It's cold out here, my father's voice continued. Let me in, son. I pressed my pillow over my ears until the knocking finally stopped. In the morning, I checked outside our window. Fresh snow had fallen overnight. but there wasn't a single footprint anywhere near the building. "You look like hell," Alfred said, pushing a plate of reconstituted eggs toward me in the mess hall. "Didn't sleep much." I took a bite, not tasting anything. The knocking kept me up. Alfred nodded like this was perfectly normal. "You get used to it, sort of." It was my dad's voice last night. "Yeah, they do that." He took a sip of coffee. "Last month it was my sister for 3 nights straight. She lives in Arizona." I looked around the mess hall. Janet sat alone in the corner reading something on a tablet. Caroline was by the coffee machine making notes in her weather log. Jaden wasn't around. "Does everyone hear it?" I asked. "Different for each person, different voices, different appeals." Alfred looked up from his plate. "Best not to talk about what you hear specifically. Makes it worse somehow." Shane walked in, nodding to us as he grabbed a coffee. He sat down at our table, looking even more tired than usual. "Generator 3 is acting up again," he said. "Might need to switch to backup today." I was about to respond when movement outside the window caught my eye. A figure stood in the snow about 30 yards from the station. It was Shane. Same height, same sandy blonde hair, same dye-2 parka. But Shane was sitting right across from me. "Alfred," I whispered. "Look outside." Alfred didn't turn his head. "Rule 2, Ronnie. Don't look out the windows at night. It's morning. Rule applies anytime you see something that shouldn't be there." His voice was tight. "Just look away." I couldn't. The Shane thing outside raised its hand in the same nervous wave the real Shane always used. Then it started walking toward the station. "It's coming closer," I said. Alfred reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. "Look at me, not out there. Whatever you think you're seeing, it's not real." The Shane at our table looked confused. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Alfred said quickly. "Ronnie's just tired. Hearing knocking last night." Shane nodded sympathetically. "First month's the hardest. It gets, well, not better, but you adjust." I forced myself to look away from the window, but not before seeing the other Shane press its face against the glass, its features slightly wrong, eyes too wide, mouth stretched in an unnatural smile. Dinner that night was canned stew and hard bread. Everyone gathered in the mess hall as usual. I counted heads as I entered. Jaden at the head of the table, Janet and Caroline on one side, Alfred and Shane on the other. 5 people, plus me made 6. I took my seat next to Alfred and started eating. The conversation drifted between generator maintenance, weather reports, and supply inventory, normal station talk, but something felt off. I counted again. Jaden, Janet, Caroline, Alfred, Shane, and me. 6 people. Then I saw it, a 7th figure standing in the corner by the kitchen door. It looked like Shane, but distorted somehow, like a photo that had been stretched. No one else seemed to notice it. I nudged Alfred. "Do you see that?" I whispered. "See what?" he asked, not looking up from his stew. The Shane thing in the corner didn't move. It just watched us with unblinking eyes. "Nothing," I said. "Never mind." Throughout dinner, I kept glancing at the corner. The figure remained, perfectly still except for its head, which turned to follow my movements. No one else looked at it or acknowledged it in any way. When dinner ended, everyone cleared their plates. The figure was gone when I looked again. The next morning, I headed to the communications room to relieve Janet from her night shift. When I opened the door, I found her sitting motionless at the console, headphones on, staring blankly at the radio equipment. "Janet?" I called. No response. I moved closer and noticed she was listening to something, classical music playing through her headphones. Her eyes were open but unfocused, her breathing shallow. "Janet." I shook her shoulder gently. Nothing. I pulled the headphones off her ears. The music stopped immediately. There was nothing coming through them. The radio equipment was powered down. Janet blinked rapidly, like someone waking from a deep sleep. What time is it?" "7:30, end of your shift." She looked confused, then alarmed. "I was just checking frequencies. Standard procedure." "You had headphones on. You were listening to classical music." Her face went pale. "That's not possible. The equipment was off." I helped her up. She was unsteady on her feet. "We need to tell Jaden," I said. "No." She grabbed my arm. "I'm fine, just tired." "Janet, you were in some kind of trance. The headphones weren't even connected to anything. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, let's go. We found Jaden in his office reviewing supply logs. He looked up as we entered, his expression changing when he saw Janet's face. What happened? He asked. I explained what I'd found. Janet stood silently beside me, looking at the floor. Jaden's face grew grim. Sit down, both of you. He closed his logbook and leaned forward. Last year, we lost someone. Michaels, weather observer before Caroline. I thought he was transferred, I said. That's what we tell new arrivals. Jaden looked at Janet. We found him outside, frozen solid. He'd walked out during a storm, had headphones on, connected to a radio that had no batteries. Janet's hands were shaking. I don't remember putting headphones on. It starts like that, Jaden said. Small things, hearing music that isn't there, seeing people who can't possibly be here. He looked directly at me, counting 7 people in a room that holds 6. My stomach dropped. How did you? Because we've all experienced it, he said. This station, there's something about this place. Isolation, maybe. The cold, the darkness. He shook his head. Or maybe something else entirely. What was he listening to? Janet asked quietly. Michaels. Jaden's eyes met hers. Bach. Cello Suite No. 1. Same thing he listened to every night before bed. Janet went even paler. That's what I heard, through the headphones. I know, Jaden said. That's why we have the rules. They keep us anchored. They keep us alive. He looked at both of us. Follow them. No matter what you see or hear, no matter how real it seems. I thought about the distress call, the knocking, the duplicate Shane outside, the figure at dinner. None of it made sense, but the fear in Jaden's eyes was real enough. What happens if we break the rules? I asked. Jaden's expression hardened. Then you end up like Michaels. Or worse. Worse? You become one of the things knocking to be let in. I rolled over in my bunk for what felt like the 100th time that night. The knocking had started about an hour ago, soft at first, then growing more insistent. 3 sharp raps, pause, 3 more. Ronnie, honey, are you in there? I need your help. My mom's voice came through the wall clear as day. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to block it out. Ronnie, please, I don't know where I am. It's so cold out here. The voice was perfect. The same gentle Midwestern accent, the same worried tone she used whenever Caden or I got sick as kids. But my mom was in Ohio, 2,000 miles away. I know you can hear me, sweetheart. I pressed my pillow over my ears, but it didn't help. The knocking moved to the window, the blinds still drawn tight like they always were. Ronnie, man, open up. It's freezing out here. The voice changed. Now it was Hunter, my college roommate. Same casual tone, same slight California accent. Dude, I came all this way to surprise you. Let me in. I squeezed my eyes shut. Hunter had no idea where I was stationed. We texted occasionally, but he was back in Seattle working at some tech startup. The knocking paused. I lifted the pillow slightly, hoping it was over. Ronnie, it's me. Please help me. My blood went cold. It was my own voice now, calling from outside. They've trapped me out here. That's not me in there. I'm the real Ronnie Calhoun. I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The voice was mine, exactly mine, down to the way I pronounced my last name with a slight emphasis on the first syllable. Let me in before I freeze to death, please. Shane snored softly in the bunk below, somehow sleeping through it all. I checked my watch, 4:15 in the morning. The knocking and voices continued until nearly 5 when they finally stopped. I lay awake until my alarm went off at 6. You look like crap, Alfred said as I walked into the generator room later that day. He was checking gauges on the main control panel, clipboard in hand. Thanks, I said, rubbing my eyes. Didn't sleep much. Knocking again? I nodded. My mom this time, and Hunter, my college roommate, and I stopped myself, remembering Alfred's advice about not sharing specifics. And what? Alfred glanced up from his clipboard. Nothing, just kept me up. Alfred made a note on his clipboard. Well, you're with me tonight. Jaden wants us to check the fuel lines on generator 3. It's been running hot. Great, I said, not feeling great about it at all. Working outside, even for a few minutes, wasn't my idea of fun in sub-zero temperatures. We'll go after dinner. Bring extra layers. The generator room hummed with the sound of machinery when we returned after 8. Alfred handed me a flashlight and pointed to a panel of gauges. Watch these numbers. If anything goes into the red, hit that kill switch. He tapped a large red button protected by a plastic cover. Where are you going? I asked. Need to check the external fuel lines. Won't take long. Alfred zipped his parka up to his chin and pulled on thick gloves. He grabbed a tool belt from a hook on the wall and slung it around his waist. 10 minutes tops, he said, heading for the side door that led directly outside. Keep an eye on those gauges. The door closed behind him with a metallic clank. I turned back to the panel, watching the needles hover in the safe zones. The minutes ticked by. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I checked my watch again. 20 minutes now. I walked to the door and tried the handle. It didn't budge. I pushed harder, thinking it might be stuck from the cold. Nothing. I tried again, putting my shoulder into it. The door was locked from the inside. That made no sense. Alfred had gone out this door. How could it be locked from my side? I looked around for another way out, but the only other exit was the main door back into the station. I grabbed the radio from my belt. Alfred, you copy? Static hissed back at me. Alfred, it's Ronnie. The door seems to be locked. You okay out there? More static. I tried the door again, rattling the handle. Still locked. My pulse quickened as I headed for the main door, back into the station's corridors. I'd have to go around outside to find him. I jogged through the hallway toward the main exit, passing the common room where Janet sat reading. She looked up as I rushed past. Everything okay? Alfred went outside to check the fuel lines 20 minutes ago. Doors locked and he's not answering his radio. Janet put down her book. Did you check with Jaden? Heading there now. Jaden wasn't in his office. I checked the mess hall, the communications room, and finally knocked on his personal quarters. No answer. I found Shane in the equipment room, inventorying supplies. Have you seen Jaden or Alfred? Alfred went outside to check the generators and hasn't come back. Shane shook his head. Haven't seen either of them since dinner. My stomach tightened. I headed for the main exit, grabbing my parka from the hook by the door. Shane followed me. You're not going out alone, are you? Rule 1, always work in pairs. Alfred is already out there, I said, pulling on my gloves. I'll come with you, Shane said, reaching for his own gear. We suited up and stepped out into the bitter cold. The wind hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. The temperature display by the door read -38. Alfred, I called, my voice swallowed by the wind. Alfred! Shane and I circled the building, flashlights cutting through the darkness. We reached the generator housing on the east side, where Alfred should have been checking the fuel lines. No one was there. We completed a full circuit of the station. No sign of Alfred, no footprints except our own in the fresh snow. He has to be inside, Shane said, teeth chattering. Maybe he came in through another door. We went back inside, stamping snow from our boots. I checked every room in the station while Shane radioed the others. No one had seen Alfred since dinner. This doesn't make sense, I said as we regrouped in the common room. He went outside. I watched him go. Caroline looked up from her weather log. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. We were in the generator room. He went out the side door to check the fuel lines. Jaden appeared in the doorway. What's going on? Shane explained the situation. Jaden's face hardened. We'll do a full sweep of the station, room by room, now. We split into pairs, me with Jaden, Shane with Janet, while Caroline stayed at the common room to coordinate. We checked every room, closet, and crawl space. No Alfred. This isn't possible, I said as Jaden and I finished checking the storage areas. I saw him go outside, the door locked behind him somehow. Jaden didn't respond, just kept moving methodically through our search pattern. By 3 in the morning, we'd searched the entire station twice. Alfred had vanished. Jaden finally called off the search, ordering everyone to get some rest. We'd resume at first light. What about Alfred? I asked. He's out there in -40. We've checked everywhere outside within safe distance, Jaden said, his voice tight. No one could survive longer than 30 minutes in this cold anyway. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the evening in my head. Alfred zipping his parka, grabbing his tools, walking out the door. It had happened. I wasn't crazy. First light came late this far north, almost 9 in the morning. I was already up, watching through the common room window as the darkness gave way to a dim gray twilight. That's when I saw him, a figure standing in the snow about 50 yards from the station, not moving. I pressed my face to the glass. It was Alfred, still wearing his parka, his tool belt visible around his waist. But something was wrong. Even from this distance, I could see his face was blue, his beard crusted with ice. "Jaden!" I shouted. "Everyone, he's outside!" I grabbed my cold weather gear, pulling it on as the others rushed into the room. Jaden reached the window first. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. We raced outside, all 5 of us. Alfred didn't move as we approached. He just stood there, blue-lipped, frost covering his eyebrows. "Alfred?" Janet reached him first. "Alfred, can you hear me?" His eyes focused on us slowly, like he was waking from a deep sleep. "What are you all doing out here?" His voice was hoarse but steady, no sign of hypothermia's slurred speech. "Alfred, you've been missing all night," Shane said. We looked everywhere. Alfred's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? I've been in the generator room all night." A chill that had nothing to do with the temperature ran through me. "No," I said. "You went outside to check the fuel lines. You never came back." Alfred looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Ronnie, you weren't even in the generator room last night. I was there alone." "That's not true. We went together after dinner. You went outside and the door locked behind you." Alfred shook his head. "I worked alone, all night. Just finished my shift." Jaden stepped between us. "Let's get inside, now." "This is impossible," I said once we were back in the common room. Alfred had changed into dry clothes and looked completely normal. No signs of frostbite, no hypothermia, nothing to suggest he'd spent the night in lethal cold. "Check the logs," Jaden told Caroline. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to yesterday's entry. Alfred Dixon, generator maintenance, solo shift, 2000 hours to 0600. "That's not right," I insisted. "I was with him. We went together." Caroline continued reading. "Ronnie Calhoun, communications room, 2000 hours to midnight. Janet Sandoval, communications midnight to 0600. "I wasn't in communications last night," I said. "Janet, you saw me in the hallway when I was looking for Alfred." Janet looked uncomfortable. I don't remember that." "Shane, you came outside with me to look for him." Shane stared at the floor. "I spent the evening in the equipment room, then went to bed." My head spun. This wasn't happening. I wasn't crazy. Jaden sighed heavily. "Everyone except Ronnie, give us the room." The others filed out silently, Alfred giving me a concerned look as he left. When we were alone, Jaden leaned forward in his chair. "Ronnie, do you know why we have the rules?" "For safety," I said automatically. "Yes, but it's more than that." Jaden rubbed his eyes. "This place, reality gets thin here. Things happen that can't be explained. We follow the rules because they keep us anchored." "I'm not making this up," I said. "I was with Alfred. He went outside." "I believe you experienced that," Jaden said carefully. "But Alfred experienced something different. So did everyone else. How is that possible?" "I don't know. Nobody does. But it's why we track everything. Why we work in pairs. Why we don't answer knocking." He looked at me directly. "Reality isn't as solid as we think, especially here." I tried to process what he was saying. "So what really happened last night?" "Both versions happened, or neither. The rules help us agree on one reality we can all share." He stood up. "Get some rest. And Ronnie, start keeping a journal. Write down everything that happens to you, when it happens. It helps." That night I started my journal. I wrote down everything: the knocking, the voices, Alfred's disappearance, finding him outside. I recorded times, dates, who was where. If reality was becoming thin, as Jaden put it, I needed something solid to hold on to. I wrote until my hand cramped, then tucked the journal under my mattress. Shane was already asleep in the bunk below. I switched off my light and tried to quiet my mind. Just as I was drifting off, a scream tore through the station. I bolted upright, heart pounding. Another scream, a woman's voice. "Janet." I jumped from my bunk. Shane was already up, pulling on his boots. "That's Janet," he said. We rushed into the hallway. The screams were coming from the communications room. I reached it first, throwing open the door. Janet was huddled under the desk, arms wrapped around her knees, eyes wild with terror. She pointed at the window, her hand shaking. "She's out there," Janet whispered. "She's watching me." I approached the window cautiously. The blinds were open, unusual for the station. Outside in the darkness, barely visible in the security lights, stood a figure. It was Janet. Same black hair pulled back in a ponytail, same wire-rimmed glasses, same dye-2 uniform. She stood perfectly still, staring in at us. "Don't look at it," Janet whimpered from under the desk. "It copies everything I do." As if on cue, the Janet outside raised her hand to her face, adjusting her glasses exactly as the real Janet often did. "Close the blinds," Shane said from the doorway, his voice tight. I reached for the cord, but stopped when the Janet outside mirrored my movement exactly, reaching up as if to grab something invisible. "It's copying me now," I said, my mouth dry. "Just close the damn blinds," Shane hissed. I yanked the cord. The blinds dropped, cutting off our view of whatever stood outside. Janet was still under the desk, shaking. "It was watching me for an hour," she said. "Every move I made, it made. Every time I shifted position, it did too. Perfect mirror image." I helped her to her feet as Jaden and Caroline arrived, both looking disheveled and concerned. "What happened?" Jaden demanded. Janet couldn't speak. She just pointed at the window. "There's something outside that looks like Janet," I explained. "It was mimicking her movements." Jaden's face went blank, like he was carefully controlling his reaction. "Rule 2, he said quietly. "Don't look out windows at night." "It wasn't night when it started," Janet whispered. "It was watching me through my entire shift." Caroline made a note in her ever-present logbook. "Third visual manifestation this month," she said clinically. "First reported mimicry behavior." I helped Janet to a chair while Shane made her tea. My hands were steady, but my mind raced. First Alfred, now this. The station was playing tricks on all of us. Later, back in my room, I added the incident to my journal. The entry ended with a question I couldn't answer. If whatever was outside could look like any of us, how would we know if it ever got inside? I first noticed the knocking had stopped on a Tuesday night. I'd gotten so used to the 3 sharp raps against the wall, followed by voices that shouldn't exist, that the silence felt wrong. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, waiting. Nothing came. "Shane," I whispered, "you awake?" A grunt came from the bunk below. "What?" The knocking stopped. The sheets rustled as Shane sat up. I heard him fumbling with his watch. "It's almost 2 in the morning, he said. "Go to sleep." "But it's been knocking every night for weeks. Why would it stop now?" Shane was quiet for a long moment. "Don't know. Don't care. Just enjoy it and get some sleep." I tried, but sleep wouldn't come. The absence of something that had tormented me for weeks should have been a relief. Instead, it left me on edge, like the silence before a storm. The next morning, I mentioned it to Janet while we were checking the communications equipment. "Yeah," she said, not looking up from the radio panel she was adjusting. "I noticed. Is that normal? For it to just stop?" Janet's hands went still. She glanced toward the door, then back to me. "Ask Jaden," she said quietly. "He's been here the longest." I found Jaden in the corridor outside the generator room. He was running his hand along the door frame, checking the seal. "Hey," I said, "got a minute?" He looked at me, his blue eyes narrowed. "What is it, Calhoun?" "The knocking stopped last night. Is that normal?" Something changed in his expression. His jaw tightened, and he glanced over my shoulder at the empty hallway behind me. "When did you last hear it?" he asked. 2 nights ago. My mother's voice, then my brother's. Jaden nodded, then pushed past me to check the next door in the hallway, tugging on the handle to make sure it was locked. "Jaden, what does it mean?" "It means we need to be more careful," he said, moving to the next door. "Check all the locks. Twice." I followed him down the corridor. "But why? Isn't it good that it stopped?" He spun around so suddenly I almost walked into him. "When the knocking stops," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "something's coming inside." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the station's temperature. Jaden turned away and continued checking doors, muttering under his breath as he tested each lock. I spent the rest of the day on edge, jumping at small sounds, watching the others more closely than usual. Alfred seemed normal, fixing a light fixture in the common room. Caroline was at her usual spot by the weather instruments, making her meticulous notes. Shane and Janet were playing cards, both looking tired but normal. Only Jaden seemed different, moving through the station with nervous energy, checking and rechecking doors, his eyes constantly moving. That evening, we gathered in the common room after dinner. Caroline stood by the doorway with her clipboard, doing her nightly head count. "All present," she announced. 6 personnel accounted for at 2000 hours. I looked around the room. Alfred and Shane sat on the worn couch, arguing about some basketball game from months ago. Janet was curled in an armchair with a paperback, and Jaden sat at the table near the wall, and also at the table near the wall. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks, but when I looked again, there were still 2 Jadens sitting side by side, both wearing the same dark blue sweater, both with the same day's stubble on their square jaws. "Hey," I said, my voice coming out strangely high. "Caroline, count again." She looked at me with annoyance. "I just did the count, Ronnie. 6 people, all accounted for." "Count again," I insisted. Caroline sighed but raised her clipboard. "Fine. Janet, Alfred, Shane, Jaden, you and me. 6. Look at the table," I said, pointing. "There are 2 Jadens." Everyone turned to look. The 2 Jadens turned in perfect unison, their expressions identical, a mixture of confusion and irritation. "What are you talking about?" they asked in perfect synchronization, same Boston accent, same tone. I stepped back, bumping into the wall. "There! Did you hear that? They spoke at the exact same time." Janet put down her book. "Ronnie, there's only 1 Jaden." "No, there are 2, right there." I pointed again, more frantically this time. Both Jadens stood up together, moved the same way, took the same steps toward me. "Calhoun," they said together, "you need to calm down." I pressed myself against the wall. "You see that, right? Please tell me you see that." Alfred and Shane exchanged a look. Caroline wrote something on her clipboard. "See what?" Janet asked carefully. "The 2 Jadens. They're moving exactly the same way, speaking together." The 2 Jadens stopped a few feet from me. They crossed their arms at the same moment, tilted their heads at the same angle. "There's only 1 of me, Calhoun," they said together. I closed my eyes, counted to 5, opened them again. Still 2 Jadens, standing in exactly the same posture. "I think you should get some rest," Caroline said from behind her clipboard. "You've been under a lot of stress." "I'm not," I started, then stopped. A horrible thought struck me. What if I was the only one who could see the duplicate? What if this was happening to me alone? The rules. I suddenly thought of the laminated card Jaden had given me my first day. The rules weren't just arbitrary safety measures, they were a survival manual for a place where reality itself couldn't be trusted. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're right. I'm tired. I'm going to turn in early." I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on the 2 Jadens. They watched me go, their expressions still perfectly matched. In my room, I pulled out my journal from under the mattress and wrote everything down with shaking hands. When I finished, I stared at the words on the page, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. The rules always work in pairs, because you need someone else to verify what's real. Avoid windows at night, because what you see outside might not exist. Never answer knocks, because what calls your name isn't who it claims to be. The rules weren't just safety guidelines, they were anchors to reality in a place where perception became dangerously unreliable. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bunk, listening to Shane's steady breathing below, and wondering if he was really Shane at all. The next day passed in a blur. I avoided Jaden, or Jadens, as much as possible. When we did cross paths, I saw only one of him, but I couldn't shake the memory of the previous night. No one mentioned my outburst, but I caught them watching me when they thought I wasn't looking. That night was my last at the station. My 6-month rotation was up, and the relief helicopter was scheduled to arrive in the morning. I should have felt relieved, but as I packed my few belongings, a new fear took hold. What if whatever was happening at the station had already changed me? What if I took it with me when I left? I was folding my last sweater when the knocking started again. 3 sharp raps on the wall next to my bunk. "Ronnie," came a voice from outside. My voice. "Ronnie, let me in." I froze. The sweater clutched in my hands. "Ronnie, please," my voice continued. "It's me, the real me. There's an imposter in there pretending to be me. You have to let me in before the helicopter comes. Shane wasn't in the room. He was on generator duty. I was alone with the voice, my voice. I've been trapped out here for weeks, it said. That thing in there took my place. It looks like me, talks like me, but it's not me. Please, let me in. I'm freezing to death out here. I dropped the sweater and pressed my hands over my ears. Rule 3, I whispered to myself. Never answer knocks. Ronnie? The voice grew more desperate. Look outside. You'll see it's really me. Just look. Rule 2, I said, louder now. Avoid windows at night. They've all been replaced, my voice said. Janet, Shane, Alfred, Caroline, Jaden. They're not who they seem. I'm the only real one left. Please, Ronnie, let me in. I squeezed my eyes shut and recited all 6 rules, over and over, until my throat was raw. The knocking and pleading continued, growing more frantic, more desperate. I'm dying out here, my voice screamed. My fingers are turning black. Please, just open the door. I kept reciting the rules until dawn broke and the knocking finally stopped. When I left my room, backpack over my shoulder, the others were already gathered in the common room. They looked at me with expressions I couldn't read. Helicopter radioed, Janet said. They'll be here in 20 minutes. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As the others headed toward the main exit to wait for the helicopter, Jaden pulled me aside. You did good, Calhoun, he said quietly. What? You followed the rules. Not everyone does. He glanced at the others, now putting on their parkas by the door. Not everyone makes it 6 months. I swallowed hard. What is this place? What's happening here? Jaden's expression softened slightly. Some say it's the isolation. Some say it's the magnetic anomalies. Some say it's something else entirely. He shrugged. All I know is the rules work. They keep us together. Together, sane, alive, real. He looked me directly in the eyes. Some people just can't handle what the station does to their minds. And the others? Do they all see what I've been seeing? Jaden's mouth tightened into a thin line. We all see something. It's different for everyone. And the duplicates? The voices? Part of it. You learn to ignore them, or you don't, and you get replaced. He put a hand on my shoulder. You made it, Calhoun. That's what matters. The distant sound of helicopter blades cut through the air. Jaden gave my shoulder a final squeeze, then headed toward the exit. I stood alone in the common room for a moment, looking around at the space that had been my home for 6 months. I thought about the voice outside my door last night, my voice, and wondered if somewhere, in some version of reality, another Ronnie Calhoun was still out there in the snow. Then I zipped up my parka and followed Jaden to the helicopter that would take me away from this place where the rules were the only thing standing between sanity and something much worse. I leaned back against the helicopter seat as we lifted off, the rhythmic thump of the rotors vibrating through my body. Through the small window, I watched Die 2 grow smaller beneath us, a gray metal box perched on stilts in an endless white expanse. The station that had been my entire world for 6 months now looked like a child's toy abandoned in the snow. The pilot said something over the headset, but I barely registered his words. My mind was still back there, replaying everything I'd experienced, the knocking at night, the voices that shouldn't exist, the duplicates that only some could see. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of too many sleepless nights. What was that place, really? Not just a radar station, not just an isolated outpost. It was something else, a perfect storm where extreme isolation, brutal cold, and human psychology collided to create what? Hallucinations? Mass delusion? But that didn't explain everything. It couldn't explain Alfred disappearing and reappearing with no memory. It couldn't explain how Janet's duplicate had mirrored her every move outside the window. It couldn't explain why we all experienced different things, yet somehow the same pattern of madness. I pulled the laminated rules card from my pocket, running my thumb over its worn edges. 6 simple rules that had seemed so strange on my first day. Don't look out windows at night. Never answer knocks. Always work in pairs. The realization hit me then, as the helicopter banked and the station slipped from view. The rules weren't protection against ghosts or monsters or whatever supernatural force my mind had conjured to explain the unexplainable. They were protection against the station itself, against its ability to fracture perception, to split reality into competing versions that couldn't all be true. "First time leaving?" the pilot asked, his voice crackling through my headset. I nodded, tucking the card back into my pocket. "Most folks look happier to be going home," he said with a laugh. Home. The word felt strange. 6 months ago, I'd counted down the days until I could leave. Now I felt untethered, like I was leaving behind not just a place but questions I'd never get answers to. "Just processing," I said. The pilot nodded like he'd heard it all before. Maybe he had. I turned back to the window. The station was gone now, swallowed by the white horizon. All that remained was ice stretching to the edges of the world. What had Jaden said right before I left? Everyone sees something different here. Maybe that was the point. Maybe there was no single truth to uncover, no explanation that would satisfy my need to understand. Some experiences just defied explanation. I'd spent weeks trying to make sense of it all, documenting everything in my journal, looking for patterns, searching for logic in the madness. But in the end, what had kept me alive, what had kept me sane, wasn't understanding. It was following those 6 seemingly illogical rules. When reality itself became unreliable, those rules had been my anchor. Don't look out windows at night. Never answer knocks. Always work in pairs. Track everyone's whereabouts. Don't use the radio for music. Trust your instincts. I closed my eyes, feeling the distance growing between me and I too with every second. I knew I would never go back to the Arctic. No amount of money could tempt me back to that frozen outpost. But I also knew I would never forget what I learned there. That sometimes survival depends on following guidelines that make no logical sense, but somehow keep people alive. The helicopter banked again, heading south toward the coast where a plane would take me back to civilization, back to a world where knocks at the door were just visitors, where voices belonged to real people, where what you saw was what everyone else saw too. I had survived by accepting what I couldn't explain, and following rules that preserved my grip on reality when everything around me threatened to dissolve into madness. That was the lesson I was taking home, along with the nagging question that would probably haunt me forever. What happened to those who didn't make it? Those who got replaced, as Jaden put it. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice wondered if the real Ronnie Calhoun was still out there in the snow, frozen and forgotten, while something else flew home in his place. I pushed the thought away and focused on the horizon ahead. I had followed the rules. I had survived. That would have to be enough.